All right, are you ready to wake up? All right, okay. Great to be here. I love the theme. The theme is engaging the world. And to do that, we're going to have a different kind of consciousness than we're accustomed to in the modern world. Now, I have to tell you that putting all this together for you today, we're about to walk into the infinite together in a decidedly finite period of time. So after a moment of panic, I realized, oh no, this is consciousness. And one of the things consciousness does is it works by organizing principles. One of those principles is the principle of complementarities, to bring together complementary opposites, not just for the puzzle piece and then we're done, but to bring together things to create the next level, to create more consciousness, to create joy, to create something we've never even imagined before. So let's see if we can have that happen today. So some ground rules for you. You've got an imagination switch between your ears, so I'd like you to run in there and turn it on to super high, duct tape it in place, okay? You got that? I want you to feel what we're going to talk about. Feel, so we have a connection, because otherwise it might just disappear into the ether. So feel, don't think about this. I need you to feel. And I want to give you, first of all, two views of consciousness. One is of human consciousness, and the other is quite remarkable. So the first view comes from the Yaqui elders in central Mexico, and here's what they say about human beings. They say that the core of our being is perception, and the magic of our being is awareness. So I want you to remember that. What perception means is to be aware of the entire diverse surroundings through your senses. So plug that in someplace inside you. Now let's go to physics. Max Planck, who's one of my favorite physicists, was considering a model of an atom one day, and he's looking at the electrons going around in their little orbits, and he said, well, it's clear there are forces that keep those electrons in their orbits, but you know, if you stay with that model and feel it while you're looking at it, you will come to know that there is an intelligence that moves those forces, that keeps those electrons in their orbits. And that intelligence is what human beings, until the modern age, until the Industrial Revolution, I think, that intelligence is what we have always known to be consciousness. We are not the owners of consciousness, we are the speech. And when consciousness finds you, and it will, believe me, if you're intelligent and half awake, it'll find you and it will speak you into being. So I'm going to tell you to start what happens when consciousness finds you by telling you what happened when it found me. Now, you've heard a little bit about my career: biochemistry, neurophysiology, graphic design, business, finance, a lot of travel in the wilderness. I love the Arctic. The top of the planet is magical. It's beautiful. And in addition, I have the incredible honor of having been trained and initiated by indigenous elders around the world: West Africa, South America, foothills of the Himalayas. And I used to think that I was like a bug on a hot stove, you know, jumping all around, couldn't settle down. Science to design, what was I doing? But now I see in retrospect that consciousness was forming me so we could be here today. And many other things, you know. You can't strategize your way to awakeness to global consciousness. So I want to give you some seeds of what I was learning, what consciousness was teaching me. In science, you know what we do in the world today? We have an experience and then we try to prove that we had it, right? And we do it by measuring in 2 dimensions at most. And we don't do very well. We miss most of the world. So I realized that consciousness was teaching us that the world can be known directly through all the senses in multiple dimensions at the speed of light, with not one piece of data of all the interrelationships and possibilities, not one piece of data dropped. And we're doing that 24/7 anyway. The world can be known, right? This is how the Amazon cultures know far more pharmacology and biochemistry than our modern scientists. We can't even replicate what they explain to us because we only get a tiny part of the world. In graphic design, I learned how to make information visible, like magic, right? And you do that by encoding information in beauty. And when you experience beauty, what happens to you? You open, you have insights, consciousness grows. It's exactly what happens in nature. And that intelligence that Max Planck found is always streaming through. Our job is to become portals for that intelligence and create with it. Right? So that's design. In the Arctic, you put yourself in a big enough chunk of nature and you sit there and don't think. Really important, don't think, just feel. Consciousness will speak through you. You will have what we usually call a peak experience, but it's got to be longer than a nanosecond. You've got to put your attention to the world, and that's what we're going to talk about. That's what entering global consciousness is to get your attention off yourself and onto the world and enter a conversation. So our relationship to nature is really important. Consciousness also taught me that business, let's talk about business. It runs the world, right? Business is nothing more or less than a center for the creation, exchange, and distribution of value. And as far as global consciousness is concerned, the only thing that's valuable is that which supports thriving. Just consider marketing later tonight and see how much we add value to that does not support thriving, okay? Then, when I met the indigenous elders, here's what they said to me. They said, all of that stuff that you've been experiencing, that's a technology. There is a technology to consciousness. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that technology in terms of the Andean cultures. They have the purest expression of this technology. It's as close to physics as we can get, and it also includes human consciousness. Very, very precise. So there I was, a scientist again, but I was a shamanic scientist, right? Oh, I've lost my slides. Okay. I had beautiful pictures for you. Oh, there we go. Let me come back. I mean, I'm beautiful, but yeah. All right, so this is that stream of intelligence coming into the world that we were talking about. So, and the indigenous elders who taught me. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about these organizing principles of consciousness. This is the technology of consciousness. To set the stage here, you know, the T in TED, it means technology. Let me tell you what our own dictionary says. It doesn't say gadgets. It says a body of knowledge applied to a problem or an inquiry to solve the problem or advance the inquiry. That's technology. And that's how humans have always understood technology, not as gadgets. So I'm going to tell you about a body of interwoven principles through which we access that stream of intelligence and create. That's our job as humans. The very core principle is the word in Quechua. This is from the Andes, a beautiful language. The word is pacha. And I want you to do this with me right now. It's really easy to do. I want you to simply feel the room around you. Don't feel things, feel energies. Just let a breath out and feel around you. Feel the energy. And you might catch that for just a little moment, there is nothing but what's here. It's all the now. There's no past, there's no carrot on a stick that you're chasing after. Everything is here now. Everything is here now. And that's pacha. That is being organized in consciousness beyond the ego structure. And global consciousness, collective consciousness is beyond the ego structure. It's beyond space-time. It is limitless. It is infinite. And this is where we have to be in order to solve the world's problems and start thriving again. So once you are organized by one of these principles, oops, wrong way. You see, I don't work in a linear fashion, so. So let me tell you about another one of these principles. The principle is Aini in Quechua. It means very simplistically reciprocity, that bringing together of complementary opposites is one expression of it. But let me tell you a deeper expression. It's very sophisticated. Imagine you've got two little magnets, and they go together, plus and minus, really easily. But let's turn one of those around and try to put like poles of the magnet together. And you know what happens. There's that little pillow of energy, and they don't quite go together. And what we do in this culture is we seek sameness, and we push away difference. How in the world are you going to make a molecule if you do that? Let alone create anything else, right? But here we are, seeking sameness. Oh yeah, we're together, we're all collective, it's global. And we're ignoring this wild stuff sitting between us that an indigenous person could train us to literally grab that wild energy and fuel creative processes that we cannot imagine in the kind of consciousness that we sit in. Another thing that I does for us when you're trained in these principles, we have a lot of irreconcilable things in the world today, do we not? Imagine that you could sit in awareness and hold in awareness two irreconcilable ideologies, ideas, products, who cares what it is, and simply articulate the differences. Acknowledge in consciousness, this is this and this is this, and then you don't do anything. Our question is always, what do I do? What do I do? Nothing is the answer. You let it be. So global consciousness, we're talking about a state of being. If we could harmonize the world, there would be no wars. The economies would be completely different. People would be happy. All right? So we're talking about a state of being. Aini. All of the other principles are accessible the minute you get your consciousness organized by the first one, pacha, to be here now, outside of the constraints of time. And so we find as we practice, I want you all to just practice being organized by pacha. You'll find your life changes. What happens is we become people who are in love. Munai is one of the principles. Munai means to love. It means to accept unconditionally. How can you solve a problem if you don't accept what's so unconditionally, right? Munai comes immediately. Ayu, another Quechua word, means the collective. Immediately, if you know this principle of relationships that we're talking about, you have a collective. Relationships are no problem, and every investment you make in a relationship will bring you at least a twofold return and at least a tenfold return to the collective. This is a state of being, right? Aini, Munai, Ayu. Now, you want to wonder why modern people don't just be this. Why is this? So I want to give you a whirlwind tour of our neurophysiology. We have to understand how we hold consciousness. Now I want you to imagine your brain. Don't think of the hemispheres because that's too old an idea. So imagine you got this 3-pound thing, approximately. 98% of this brain, 98% is in the business of global consciousness. It is constantly, 24/7, perceiving the world through the senses. It receives everything, it remembers everything, it uses all that data to create. And one of the things it creates is language. Another thing it creates is strategy, logic. It doesn't use these things, it creates them, and it delivers them to the other 2% of our brain, our conscious unit here. And that 2% uses those maps, if you will, to make our way through the world or to reflect on what we're creating. All really great discoverers, people like Einstein, Tesla, we've got a whole list of them. They were really skilled at staying in there, we call it imagination, and imagining and reflecting and mixing and matching before they lifted a finger to cut a tree down or take any minerals out of the earth to produce anything. We have an incredible capacity, all right? So the 98% perceives the whole and puts us in what we call relational or experiential intelligence. These are terms from neurophysiology. In relationship with a whole, everything is available. See, here's pacha, right? This is the deal. Everything is fed, is valued, is contributing, and contributed to. That's relational awareness. And what we do with this is we create the roadmaps through the landscape. Now, what's happened with modern people is we're very enamored of our ability to create those maps and those things and so on. And we have put all the energy of awareness into that 2%. 2% of 3 pounds is 0.96 ounces. It's barely 2 tablespoons of brain tissue. That's where modern people are awake. You see the problem, right? Plus, it's not even wired directly to the world. It only gets after the fact data. That's why we're constantly behind the melting ice caps. We're living with lagging indicators. That's our awareness. So another image of how we are awake. We've cast a shadow over our genius. This is a bit of a problem, right? We've cast a shadow. We call it the unconscious. No indigenous culture ever called it the unconscious. The Polynesians, starting 1,000 years before Christ, in full consciousness, in global consciousness, mapped 4/5 of the Pacific Ocean with incredible accuracy by dead reckoning alone. And they kept that knowledge and added to it, they kept it alive through at least 8 generations of their culture. Now, we don't need to map the Pacific Ocean anymore, but imagine if we reclaimed that skill and applied it to our problems now. We would catch up to the melting ice caps and be able to do something so we could thrive again. And I hope this is making sense to you. And see that little glow around the edges? You know this thing that we call intuition and synchronicity, and we walk right by it because we don't believe it. Well, all that is global consciousness, that stream of intelligence trying to get your attention. And what we need to do is to wake up to that. We need to wake up to it. Now, lucky for us, consciousness, global consciousness, is always evolving, it's always rising, it is always speaking. And I want to say this again, it speaks through this matrix of very precise organizing principles that you can learn. You can learn them from me or the masters in the Andes. It's precise, it's happening whether you know it or not. And we see the results, like these flowers coming out of the mother plant, if you will. And we see it all over the place. Read Paul Hawken, Blessed Unrest, over 2 million independent organizations in the world working on behalf of the planet and social justice. That's consciousness rising. It only reaches for thriving, right? Enrique Peñalosa redesigning cities in South America so people could feel joy. Joy is an organizing principle of consciousness, right? There's a way to experience and engage energy so you literally create joy. Right? If you read Raj Sisodia, Firms of Endearment, it's a business book. This is very important. If you need the lagging indicators, they are now measuring how much more profitable your company can be when you love your people, when you pay attention to the quality and the dynamic of the relationships, when you link your employees and your customers and your stakeholders. I think we need another word. Stakeholders always gives me a really bad image. We be kinder, right? Somehow. It's rising all over the place. People are studying different economies. The Rexpedition, Jerry Mikulski's relationship economy expedition, looking at different ways to create value and manage exchanges and the flow of information in the world. Extraordinary stuff. But here's what happens. We don't know about this beautiful net of organizing principles. We don't know how relational, experiential intelligence works. We're sitting in that little crescent, which only sees the parts. It is not wired to see the interrelationships. This is science. It's neurophysiology. And so we see this idea and this idea and this idea and this idea, and we trademark this one, and we try to compete this one out of existence. You get the idea? Plus, it's even actually worse than that. We get a beautiful relational idea and we reduce it to that flat map, that road through the wilderness. We no longer perceive the dimensions of what it could do. We're losing data every day. We're losing our capacity every day, and we really need to come back into our fullness, our original genius. We used to have it and we've lost it. since we started making things and focusing on the end products. And, you know, I was trying to think of an extraordinary fireworks kind of finish to this talk, but here's the deal. Consciousness is infinite. There is no end. This is a conversation we just started. It's going to go on forever. And before you can really use and embody and become those organizing principles, the first thing every human on the planet has to do is return to the planet. Put yourself in a big chunk of wilderness and sit there and make yourself not think but feel instead. And consciousness will start to flow through you and teach you. This is how all these beautiful ideas are rising in business and in social methodologies now, because consciousness is speaking. The very first thing to do is put yourself in that stream, that beautiful stream of intelligence that's always coming through into this world. And feel, don't think. Feel, don't think. And the minute you start to understand you have already become a loving, connected person, my advice, my prayer is that we all go retrieve some knowledge. It's being held for us by the indigenous elders in the wisdom base of humankind. Let's not lose it. Let's wake up together. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.